Untuk itu kita mempersiapkan diri kebaikan pun khususnya di bidang tridani, bahwa UKI menjadi UKI yang hebat. UKI hebat.
Second day and before you. So yesterday sessions, our first plenary was on how genre rasa that systematical orders or steps out a genre of organizational and linguistic features may help being taught lexical achieve what it is here doctorization in education, and education can potentially belong as legit to Professor Dergeasa. And now we will look at day this afternoon's session.
Thank you very much, Dr. Raymond. Am I audible?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Well, ladies and gentlemen, since our shift to online learning from in-class learning was sudden, didn't have good preparation, need to keep on improving our online teaching practice to make it more in the plenaries that I believe will from the two speakers. The first speaker will talk about findings from the current research on I believe information and ideas to the speaker is from Jambu, the director of the Research Utilization, Publication and Information Dissemination Center of the Western Mindanao State University. So he will talk about in 30 to 40 minutes. After that, we are going to have 20 to 30 minutes question and answer. So while Dr. Erickson is making the presentations, you are welcome to type your questions or feedback in the chat room, so that after finishing his presentation, Dr. Erickson can directly respond to your questions or feedbacks. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome Erickson Olario Alieto, PhD. Dr. Erickson, the mic is yours. Have a nice presentation.
Thank you very much, and a pleasant afternoon to everyone.
Yeah.
Okay. At the outset, I fervently wish that everybody is at the peak of his health or her health, and that we are safe and sound wherever we are at this very time. I agree that this discussion or research is timely, and it is also necessary because this demands something and asks reflections from us, scholars, researchers, and teachers as well. So this study is entitled When Language Learning Suddenly Becomes Online, Analyzing English as Second Language Learners' Attitude and Technological Competence. From the study alone or title alone, we can see that the two main focus of this investigation are attitude and technological competence of the students or the learners. We agree, or all of us agree, that the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic has greatly impacted the educational sphere. And according to scholars, the greatest alteration that it has caused is the shift in the teaching modality. We understand that there are three modalities that are basically documented in literature. The first one is the traditional, or popularly known as the face-to-face modality, where the teacher and students need to be in a definite place at a particular time for the delivery and learning of education. The other one is the more modern one, known as digital or online education, which also is called by other names such as virtual education, virtual teaching, or virtual learning. And the third one is the hybrid or mixture of the two. But we understand that because face to face or traditional instruction could not be hosted or held because it is a means to which the pandemic would continuously spread, and the cessation of it is seen by governments across the world as a measure to stop the widespread of the virus or COVID-19. Face-to-face classroom or face-to-face instruction was put to a halt. Then we migrated, or institutions in the world still deemed it necessary to continue the education of the young. Hence, we moved or migrated to virtual education or virtual teaching, which according to scholars such as Chung and et al., it has critically modified the manner our learners are learning. But I'd like to point out along this line that online learning is something that has not just recently came about. In fact, scholars are saying that it is already popular and a trend among universities, especially in developed countries, and its popularity has started in the year 1990s. However, the sad thing is that, as pointed out by the reason for the popularity of this modality or format is that it offers convenience, because online learning allow you to learn or take education without leaving home. There's no need for you to prepare, to travel, to go to a particular place, or in most cases, that's the school. And learning within the comfort of your home is very much convenient. It allows flexibility of learning as well, especially with respect to asynchronous learning, because you could access or of the instructional materials at your most convenient time. If we try to look at it at the perspective of the students, it presents also a non-discriminating environment, according to some author, because classes happen or interaction happens in a virtual classroom. And online education is a borderless education, that it tends to transcend the limitation of space and time. People across the world or people separated by time and geography could still continuously share, learn, and interact with each other. And some are saying that this kind of education is relatively affordable. However, we understand that despite this type or format of education is popular and has become the preference of learners across many countries, the extensive practice and popularity of this modality is isolated in some countries, as claimed by Antonio et al., especially to developed countries. But in case of developing countries such as the Philippines, this does not hold true. In fact, authors are claiming that it was only until recently that the common public has understood or had an idea about what online learning is, or online education or digital education. So this background provides us an understanding that the Philippine educational system, and of course, this is also similar or the case of other countries that had not yet completely adopted or integrated technology in their teaching, remains to favor the traditional approach. Hence, we can say that online learning is at its infancy in the country. And it could be deduced that the shift to online modality was not realized in a manner that there is an introduction, smooth transition. It was characterized by others such as haste, no? As an act that was hastily done. And we could not blame, of course, educational institutions to do that, because no amount of preparation, or was it something that was foreseen? The COVID pandemic outbreak was not something that could be predicted nor foreseen. And because of that, there is a need to continue the education of the young. There was an action that was characterized to be immediate and suddenly done. And that is a concern because online education has requisites. Scholars have pointed out that ownership of technical materials such as laptop, mobile phone is necessary, because one could not perform online learning without these materials. Apart from that, there is also a need to be acquainted with different applications and platforms or learning management systems, such as the Microsoft Teams, for example. But then scholars like UCL and COCA provided two essential things that greatly influence success in online learning. The first one is technological competence. This is logical because even if you have computers and laptops or cellular phones with you, but you're not competent in navigating in the internet or using these applications, these material things or technical support will not make sense or will not be well used or effectively used in the process of learning digitally. The other one is attitude. We understand that attitude is a variable that should be considered with respect to adoption of things such as this type of modality. Erwin said that it is an enabling or a disabling factor, meaning if one person does not favor any object, thing, or idea, most likely that person would, most likely the individual will not participate, would not act or behave in favor of such a thing. Therefore, these two things, attitude and technological competence, are very important things to consider. Not only the provisions of technology, not only the provisions of technical support or materials and internet connection, but the idea of are the students willing to learn digitally because they are so accustomed to learning through the traditional or via the traditional format? And do they have the technological competence to basically facilitate, navigate themselves, and utilize the different platforms and technical support for them to successfully learn online? And because of this, there were many scholars who conducted investigation that looked into technological competence and attitude towards online learning. However, sad to point out that most of these investigations were focused and directed towards teachers. This is to say that it appeared, with these investigations conducted and those available in the internet, it appeared that the teachers are the most researched and investigated individuals with respect to attitude and competence in the context of online teaching or digital education. Although we understand the reason for that, because teacher plays an important role in the performance of online education. However, we must understand that the center of the educative process remains to be the student. They are equally important, that even if the teachers are technology competent and they have the attitude to adopt online teaching or online learning, the students remain to be underserved by literature or research in this case. That is why this study is conducted against the said background, because we understand that online learning is multifaceted, and the two most prominent aspects are technological competence and attitude. And the students should be their technological competence and attitude towards online learning should be investigated, because we understand that online learning is something that has come to stay. It is assumed and argued that even if after the pandemic, educational institution will try to integrate and accommodate and adopt online teaching as a normal practice or a common practice already in the institution. And it is not something that will be here only for a present time for a particular period. It is something that will stay. And because of this, it is necessary or important that we basically look into the technological competence and attitude of our learners, especially in the context of the Philippines, because the shift was very much sudden, that the students were asked to attend virtual classes without considering whether they prefer it or not. Second, whether they have the needed training, because it was done in a haste. So this study technically investigates the attitude and technological competence of learners who have not had any prior online learning experience. This study is guided by 5 questions. It intends to determine what's the technological competence, what's the attitude towards online learning, is there a significant difference in the attitude and technological competence of the respondents across gender, and is there a relationship between the two variables? The methodology, for the methodology, the research design of the study is descriptive, quantitative, correlational. It's quantitative because it intends to measure or quantify the latent variables, utilizing survey questionnaire, which is a classic technique utilized in quantitative studies. The questionnaires were validated, pilot tested, and tested for reliability. It's descriptive because it intends to measure the phenomenon or characterize the phenomenon by simply utilizing simple statistics limited to, in this case of the study, mean and standard deviation. And because the study intends to see whether a relationship exists between the variables, it is also determined or identified as correlational. The study basically is a cross-sectional investigation because the gathering of the data was realized within a relatively short period of time. And the respondents, the study enlisted a total of 1,408 students attending online classes. This is very difficult to do because most of the students in the Philippines, especially those in the public school system, are having their education in full modular approach, meaning the students are receiving modules from their teachers, answering it, and then returning it to their teachers for feedbacking. Very few institutions or academic institutions are utilizing online format or blended format at that. But then because we wanted to provide an understanding about students' attitude towards online learning, because sooner or later, the Department of Education will be adopting the online or the digital modality for teaching our young. Because it has been found that students who are attending digital classes are performing better than those who are simply answering or responding to modules at home. In terms of gender, the majority of the respondents are females, and then most of them are coming from private institutions, and most of them are from average academic or average economic status. To quantify, the study utilized two survey questionnaires: the Attitude Towards Online Learning questionnaire, which was developed through taking inspiration from authors enumerated herein. The items were developed and then later on validated and then pilot tested. It was determined that the item or the questionnaire is of 0.9 reliability, Cronbach's alpha reliability, which is characterized to be of excellent reliability. In total, this questionnaire is of 15 items divided into three aspects because attitude is an omnibus variable. It is based, the development of the instrument is based on the tripartite model of attitude. That attitude is composed of three aspects: the conative, the cognitive, and the affective. Affective relates to the emotional response, cognitive to the belief, conative behavior. And this questionnaire is answerable by a 4-point Likert scale. On the other hand, the technological competence tool, we adopted the research tool utilized by Javier. However, the instrument was originally used with teachers, the Filipino language teachers. So what we did was we changed or shifted the focus from being teacher-centered to student-centered. Some items were removed because of their suitability. They were not suitable for this with respect to the objective of the present study. So because we considered the changes or alteration major, what we did was we pilot tested the instrument to 100 students who did not form part of the final sampling frame. And we reached or yielded a 0.89 Cronbach's alpha reliability. Because of this, we deemed the instrument to be reliable, and the instrument finally is of 10 items answerable with a 4-point Likert scale. And here are the results of the study. And for us to be able to determine the attitude, what we did was to quantify the score of the 15 items. And of course, we first quantified 5 items for each section, the affective, cognitive, and cognitive aspects, and then add and then divided into 3. And then the weighted average mean or the mean score is given interpretation by the developed scale utilizing equal interval. So here the result, here is the interestingly, with respect to the emotional response, they are geared towards becoming positive. Overall, the students showed or manifested an attitude that is characterized as somehow negative. This means that the attitude of the respondents geared towards becoming negative. This is similar in the findings of Jacinto and Nieto and Javier. However, the findings of Javier and Jacinto, which suggested that the teachers are showing a somehow negative attitude towards online education, this finding is confined among teachers. So this result or findings provide an interesting understanding that it is not only the teachers in the Philippines in general, with respect to the generalizability of these investigations, that are showing or manifesting a somehow negative attitude. The students as well are manifesting this attitude, which suggests that there is a sense of apprehension traditional modality of learning. It is logical to understand that, when you are taken away from your comfort zone, your initial response is to basically fear or be doubtful about the new things that you're doing. So we try to understand that this is perhaps what is the reason why the students are manifesting such type or kind of attitude. They have been confined to understand that education should only take place in a definite time, with people around you in a definite place, the traditional perspective or format about it. Especially this type of learners have not had any experience of online learning. The other one is that the other supposition is that because the students had not received any form of training, which could have prepared them for online learning. Remember that it was a sudden among administrators of institutions. We understand that such action, it appeared that it seems to be a non-consultative process. But we understand that because it was trying times, trying times need attributed to the attitude that our students are manifesting knowledge, technical knowledge to manipulate our students, do not have that enough to allow them. This time, we probe into determining the technological competence of our students. And it was found out that in terms of level of competence, they are able to manipulate, utilize, proficient in the use of. And if we try to look at it, the detailed analysis of this percent of the respondent claim to be very competent. The tools and application software or hardware for them to be able to perform online classes. And interestingly, or I don't think it's very interesting, perhaps this provides a warning. This is a red flag that a whooping 87.5% of the total respondents surveyed.
Saat saya masih anak-anak, kedua orang tua dan saya pindah dari Indonesia ke Amerika.
Dulu ke informasi yang pertama,
Gender
Sultan
here
Hasanah
is
Bolkiah.
Brunei, Presiden Jokowi juga sempat bertemu dengan siswa berprestasi. Dalam pertemuannya itu, Jokowi memamerkan jaket barunya yang kemudian meramaikan lini masa Twitter dengan tagar jaket baru Jokowi.
Culturally conceived sex is basically gender.
Gaya komunikasi Presiden Joko Widodo memang terkadang nyeleneh. Saat menerima kedatangan Sultan Hasanah Bolkiah ke Indonesia, Presiden Jokowi mengajak Sultan Brunei bermain bulu tangkis di gelanggang olahraga Ahmadiyani Mabes TNI. Dalam pertandingan ganda, Presiden Jokowi berpasangan dengan legenda bulu tangkis Indonesia, Alan Budi Kusuma. Sementara Sultan Hasanah Bolkiah berpasangan dengan pelatih tunggal putra Indonesia, Hendry Saputra. Pertandingan berlangsung sengit dan disudahi melalui hasil imbang dengan skor jus 25 untuk tim Presiden Jokowi dan 25 untuk tim Sultan Brunei.
Keringetnya keluar 2 ember tadi. Jadi seger, fresh, tapi yang paling penting tamunya terlayani dan inilah bagian dari persahabatan antar negara.
Aksi Presiden Jokowi memang kerap menjadi perbincangan. Hari Kamis kemarin, tagar jaket baru Jokowi juga sempat menduduki trending topik terpopuler di lini masa Twitter tanah air. Dalam acara temu siswa-siswi berprestasi di Istana Bogor Kamis pagi, Presiden Jokowi memamerkan jaket baru yang berlogo Asian Games. Di bagian depan tampak logo dan warna terang yang menjadi ciri khas Asian Games 2018. Sementara di bagian belakang jaket bertuliskan Asian Games dan gambar berbagai cabang olahraga.
Across gender with respect to attitude towards online education. But then if we try to analyze the results that suggests the neutral effect of gender on attitude is true among teachers, and the studies that were earlier conducted utilized very modest sample size. Those studies enlisted less than 500 respondents. This investigation enlisted 1,400 respondents. Seemed to be it is almost like triple of the respondents utilized by previous studies, which is assumed to be the reason why there is a difference because of the number of respondents. It utilized larger sample size. And one interesting result is that if gender is neutral among teachers with respect to attitude towards online education, with respect among students, gender plays an influencing role, that males prefer more or prefer online learning than females do. And then, is there a significant difference in the level of technological competence between male and female? The study suggests that there is significant difference, and this time it remains to favor the males. The males are having higher technological competence. Of course, Ilumaki example claimed that because of the utilization of a survey questionnaire in determining technological competence, he is providing the picture that this may not be a true way of capturing technological competence of respondents, because males sometimes overrate themselves with respect to technological competence. However, if we try to see much of the studies conducted determining technological competence using survey questionnaire provides that the ability to rate oneself with respect to using a technological competence questionnaire as a mirror to reflect is a valid way of determining technological competence. So here we would like to present that in self-report, the females reported or claimed that they are only somehow competent, while the males reported that they are competent with respect to use of technology that is basically utilized, or information communication technology utilized in conducting online classes. On the other note, this particular result counters the findings of previously conducted investigation. Jacinto and Javier claimed that gender is not a factor influencing differences. However, I'd like to point out again, if I have not highlighted it enough, these investigations were among teachers. But then this study conducted among students provided that they are competent in the use of different technological tools that is utilized in their investigation in conducting online classes. It was wise to determine whether the two variables correlate with each other. Hence, we subjected the attitude towards online learning. It was found out that there is indeed a significant relationship between the two variables, and the relationship is positive. This means that those who have higher technological competence are the ones who are manifesting positive attitude towards online learning. It is logical. The result provides the findings is logical, because if a person is able to navigate himself well and perform well through effective use of technical materials, gadgets, and technology in conducting or performing online learning, his experience will not be frustrating. However, those who have low technological competence are perceived to have a frustrating type of online.
Sorry for Dr. Erickson, sorry for interrupting.
Yes.
It's a good idea if you can finish your presentation in 5 minutes.
This study is also corroborated by previous investigation. However, we find that the results do not only mirror, but also provides the idea that the relationship is not only moderate nor weak. The study presents that there is a strong correlation between positive attitude, and conversely, those who have low technological competence are the ones manifesting negative attitude towards online learning. Immediate intervention needs to be carried out, because Edwin said that if an attitude is a disabling or enabling factor. So if our students continuously not to favor online learning, it may lead to the failure or ineffectiveness of online teaching or online education. And the delivery of service in the Philippine educational system to the Filipino learners has to loosen up from its sheer rigidity of face-to-face synchronous session and has to embark on a more flexible delivery of instruction. And the scheme must undertake afforded to our learners for the use of software and hardware, and provision of necessary technology and internet connection should also be considered. That would be all. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the nice and interesting presentations, Dr. Erickson. So, ladies and gentlemen, I believe that we have got some interesting findings from the presentation. So it's now time for us to have questions and answer sessions. Once again, please feel free to type your questions on the chat box. And then Dr. Erickson will try to respond directly to your questions. And Dr. Erickson, while we are waiting for the audience to type their questions, please allow me to, let's say, that today's students are millennials, tech savvy. That means they have good competence actually in using, let's say, information technology. And it is confirmed by your findings that their technological competence is in general somehow competent.
Yes.
But their attitude is was somehow negative. This means that the ability to use technology doesn't guarantee that students will have good. Suggest that students needs a kind of training for using the technology in online learning. What is your, let's say, practical suggestions? Do you think that training, let's say that to all students? That's the first. The second one is, I think it is quite related, that one of today's students found it difficult to read, let's say, long text, or let's say a textbooks, so that sometimes I need to rewrite it in a simpler way. Let's say that patients, how to cope up this problem to let our students able to read long texts. Thank you.
Okay, this is a very interesting thing. However, I'd like to provide clarification. The study also pointed out that those who have high technological competence are the ones who are manifesting positive attitude towards online learning, and those who have low technological competence are the ones becoming negative towards online learning. Therefore, in the study, it was established that there is a need for us to develop the technological competence of our students if we want them to develop or manifest positive attitude towards online learning. Now, the question is, how are we going to train our students? It is a good backgrounder that you have presented that our students are considered millennial, and we consider them even as nativists, meaning they have not migrated to the use of technology. Instead, when they were born, technology is already present. However, this presents an understanding that perhaps what the student is very much different to the platform or the kind of technology that is utilized when we are conducting or performing online education, that is related and relevant in the conduct or performance of the online learning. If you are going to ask me what kind of training are we going to provide, first it will boil down to determining first what type of learning management system is the institution utilizing or will be utilizing. From then on, it must identify the different functionalities that should be introduced to our students. And because and prior to conduct of online learning in a different or in a selected learning management system, students must be oriented on how to facilitate themselves and how to utilize this kind of functionalities performed or needed in the learning management system. Now, asking about whether we want our students to read long text, studies conducted by Aaron Santos and others that digital learning is very much different with print reading, print and digital reading. There, it was found out in the study that students who conduct print reading tend to read insightfully and reflectively. They can go on reading lengthier texts than doing or reading digital materials. So if we try to look at it, this result suggests that it is the teacher that must adjust to these characteristics. Therefore, we need to provide materials that will synthesize already things that our students just need. Because if we are going to go against the characteristic of the present time, the present characteristic of the learners who do not value lengthy reading digitally, at the end of the day, it will be a losing battle. As teachers, we need to find strategies on how to technically encourage our students to read. And perhaps one thing is selecting a good topic that interests them, that's relevant to them, and these things perhaps may sustain reading even in digital format.
All right. Thank you very much,
You're welcome.
Dr. Erickson. I think your answers really meets what I need. Thank you.
Yes.
And now, Mr. Raymond has posted the questions. With your finding, Dr. Elieto, if we are to use this to improve delivery of our online classes, should we start focusing on attitude or technological competence?
I'm sorry, I failed to quite get that. May I ask you to repeat, sir, the question?
Yeah. With your findings, if we are to use this to improve delivery of our online classes, should we start focusing on attitude or technological competence?
Okay. I think I need to be technical about this one. But then they explained that online learning is a multifaceted construct, meaning there are many things that should be considered in the successful delivery of education digitally. Example is infrastructure, logistics support, academic policy, so on and so forth. However, two of the most important things relate to technological competence or are technological competence and attitude. Now, if you ask me, should we focus? I think it is not about focusing, but it is about considering these things. Because if we technically focus on the attitude and technological competence, and yet there are no infrastructures that supports online learning cannot take place. There will be no online learning without infrastructure which relates to internet connectivity, because these things also are necessary or needed. Therefore, ideas on focusing seems to be misleading and not wise. We must understand that we need to address all the requisites of online learning before it could be realized. Therefore, my answer is we must consider these things, along with logistic support that must be established by academic institutions, establishing of learning management system. We need to consider as well the attitude and technological competence of our students. Because if one factor or variable is not present, online education cannot manifest itself, nor will it be successful.
Okay, Raymond. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, since it seems to me that the presentation is very clear for us, we can end these sessions. But before doing that, I would like everyone to, and the committee, I think, can help us in taking the photo. So once again, please open your video, or the committee can help opening the video of everyone attended these sessions. All right. Yeah, since we have some slides, I think the committee needs to take it several times. So please keep on smiling, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe this is the first slide. And then the next slide. The other next slides. Okay. Thanks once again, Dr. Erickson, for the wonderful presentations.
My pleasure.
Yeah, we really expect that one day you can present again in face-to-face. Yeah, in offline sessions, and so thank you once again.
Thank you.
And then I return the mic to Dr. Raymond for the next program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Erickson O. Alieto, for delivering a very good presentation as our third plenary session speaker. And now as we move on with our program, let us now see or watch a traditional dance from Indonesia. Thank you very much. So we've just watched another traditional dance from Indonesia. Now I'll transfer the floor to our moderator, Mr. Parlidungan Pardede, sir, for the next plenary session.
Thank you, Dr. Raymond. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as I told you earlier that as educator or researchers, today, even though we have practiced online teaching and learning for more than 1 year, we still need to keep on improving our teaching practice. And in that attempt, I myself, and I believe many of you also, focus on how to make the teaching method better, and then how to design learning media and material better. And possibly also we concerns and focus on how to use technology better. The topic that we are going to listen to here in the next presentations is, I believe, a very rarely discussed. I myself have never paid attention to this topic. It deals with the quality of life and well-being in the classroom. So I think this is a very exciting topic to pay attention to. And the speaker, Dr. Judith Hanks, has long been teaching English as a lecturer in many countries. He has been a teacher, educator, and lecturer in China, Italy, Singapore, and the United Kingdom. She teaches and researches internationally, focusing on exploratory practice, teacher and learner well-being, and intercultural issues when mentoring in language teacher education. She is also a productive writer. Her main publications include The Developing Language Learner, an introduction to exploratory practice, and her most recent book is titled Exploratory Practice in Language Teaching, Puzzling About Principles and Practices. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Dr. Judith Hanks. Dr. Judith, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you for inviting me to come and speak at your conference. My name is Judith Hanks and I'm talking to you from the University of Leeds in the UK. And the title of my talk is Exploring the New Normal in Educational Practice, Researching Quality of Life, Resilience, and I'd like to start by asking you to think about what we normally do in our classes. Please suggest your own activities for a moment. I've started the table here by putting in pair work and essays, essay writing, reports, assignments, and so on. But of course, there are many other things that we do in our classrooms. Could you take a moment, please, to fill in one or two of the empty spaces on this table? Well, I've filled in my own typical activities so that you can compare your own answers with what I would put if I were teaching at the moment. So, as well as pair work, we might also have information gap activities, group work, projects, students asking questions, using surveys or interviews or questionnaires, vocabulary building exercises, writing sentences or paragraphs or stories. I might ask my students to brainstorm ideas. They might do this alone, or they might do this together if we were all in a classroom. Gap fills, of course, very typical. Reading and answering questions. Sometimes my students do poster presentations, and of course, listening and answering questions, as well as using iPads, phones, internet, and so on. Though I have to be honest, before the pandemic, I didn't use the internet or phones or iPads in the classroom at all. This is a new development for me and possibly for you as well. I think you'll find that most of these are very familiar. There's nothing unusual in these activities, right? Since the pandemic began in the UK, of course, we have not been teaching face-to-face. So since March, I have been having to use Zoom, Blackboard Collaborate Ultra, MS Teams, Ding Talk, all sorts of different platforms to deliver my teaching. My students use the chat functions, we use breakout rooms, and there are, of course, things like Top Hat or Padlet or all sorts of other applications that can be used. And these are becoming part of the new normal. And that's one of the things that I'd like to think about today. Underpinning my talk is the notion of practitioner research. This is research which is conducted by and for practitioners. In other words, teachers, and in exploratory practice, learners and teacher educators as well. So there are lots of different types of practitioner research, which in 2017, I tried to reconceptualize as a kind of family tree. So practitioner research is like the grandmother or grandfather. Then we have action research and lots of different kinds of action research. Exploratory practice, which is the most recent addition, and also reflective practice and many others. The form I'd like to talk about today is one that I've been involved with for many years, called exploratory practice. In other words, exploring our practices in education. It's based on the idea of puzzling. This is connected to Freire's ideas in the 1970s about an education of I wonder why. And you can see here two posters produced by my students in which they asked questions like, I wonder why does it always take me so long to use a new word, although I understand? So not problem solving, but actually just questioning, wondering why. Who ask questions like, why do some students feel their ability is higher than it is, while others ride the classroom? Why do my students fall asleep in class? Why do some students come on a course difficult to remember or recall vocabulary? And why can't my students learn to spell? So those puzzles came from the normal times of teaching, what we had before online, and we've got some new puzzles. So these are questions that puzzle me and puzzle my colleagues. Might be, why don't my learners speak in class? Well, this is even more important in teaching online. My students rarely speak because it means they have to switch on their camera and their microphone. There may be many, many reasons why they don't do that. Some may be practical, but some may be emotional. In other words, they may have low bandwidth or poor technology, or it may be that they feel shy to speak in front of other people and more shy online than in face-to-face. Another question that comes to my mind is, why do I love face-to-face teaching? I really notice the difference, and I miss being in the classroom with my students. So why is that? Why do I love it? Another question is, why are my learners motivated? We could turn that round and say, why are my learners not motivated? But either way, the question is about motivation. And what is it? Why? Why are they or are they not motivated? Another one, why do I struggle with online teaching? This may be familiar to many. Many of my colleagues ask, why don't my learners turn on their cameras? And one that I find really interesting actually is, why do the learners use chat more than talking with microphones or cameras? So if I were actually with you, and I wish I was, then I would now ask you to take a moment to talk together and to think about what puzzles you about your language learning teaching experiences. And you might divide these puzzles into what puzzles you normally and what puzzles you in this new normal. So what I'm talking about today is this notion of exploring practice. In other words, using our practice, our normal teaching activities, to help us to explore our puzzles or our questions about that practice. And the idea is that as we continue this exploring and practicing and exploring and practicing, that we integrate research and pedagogy, and at the same time, this is important because frequently teachers are exhausted. We are constantly on the verge of burnout. So quality of life is so important. And I noticed this quote from Zhilang Zhen and Hu Meixing from China, talking about Chinese teachers. And there's a saying apparently in Chinese that they are compared to candles. In other words, teachers are sacrificing themselves in the process of cultivating learners, just like a candle that burns itself out while giving light to one. When we think of teachers as learners, in other words, teachers are learning at the same time as learners are learning. In classroom teaching, teachers may grow with learners if they communicate with them and create learning opportunities for all. If you're interested, this stems from the first one is most relevant to today's talk. Put quality of life first. In other words, whatever we do, it needs to enhance our quality of life, not add to the burden. Life. In other words, trying to focus on understanding rather than solving a problem. There are so many problems that we cannot solve, but actually, if we try to understand some of them, our quality of life may, and bringing people together, of being together, of working together, you can understand why this contributes to our quality of life. Principle number 6 is to make the work a continuous enterprise. In other words, make it manageable and sustainable, not, again, not adding to the burden. Teachers already have an incredibly busy life, a heavy workload, marking, teaching, preparing, doing administration, and so on. So whatever we do, it needs to be integrated, integrating the work for understanding into our existing curricular practices, in other words, our normal teaching practices. So in this way, we minimize the burden and we maximize sustainability. And if you're interested in reading more about this, then you can have a look at Allwright 2005, Allwright and Hanks 2009, or Hanks 2017. So what might this look like in practice? Well, I've done this with my own students a few years ago now, with exploratory practice as a form of case studies. So I had 2 courses, 2 years apart. On each course, which was about 10 or 11 weeks long, between 4 and 6 weeks were included an exploratory practice strand. In those classes, we moved from preparation, in other words, the students puzzling, starting investigations, more puzzling. The students formed groups around puzzle topics, for example, speaking or reading, or, you know, why is it difficult to speak? Why don't I like reading or writing? Why am I enjoying my writing classes, and so on. They tried data collection on a very small scale, of course, but nevertheless quite rigorous. They tried interviews, questionnaires, library and internet searches, and they analysed this data and collated it into presentations. These groups of learners delivered 20-minute poster presentations of their findings, and the presentations were given by the learners for the learners and their teachers. And have to do it this way. It's just that these are the kinds of things that we would normally do on the English for Academic Purposes courses that I was teaching. So I simply used, as I would normally do, as a way of investigating their and my puzzles. So the students were puzzling and I was puzzling at the same time. The students found this very interesting because nobody had ever asked them what puzzles you about your learning before. So one of the students, who I will call Ted, it's not his real name, but he was a Japanese student, but he became very excited by this process. And he said, oh, I think it's very interesting. Like recycling, which is what he normally had to write about, recycling things, many rubbish, so I can't write about it. So he became very interested. His puzzle was very different from the others. It was about why do I learn bad words more easily than other kinds of words. And he conducted a very interesting study, actually. So if you're interested, also a book that you can have a look at. She thought it was very refreshing. She said, well, it's a nice position to say, well, you tell me the answers. If you say, go and research recycling, I've read so much on it, I feel like I know the answers, so you're not telling me anything new. So, again, she was Ted's teacher, so this question about why do we learn bad words more easily than other words, she said, I was actually generally interested, and I think that was refreshing. In the same, and he showed great understanding. I think many teachers say, I do my best. Why try their homework? Why don't they come to, because education is not just research agendas, they're puzzles. They worked together to explore those agendas, and they worked with teachers to collect or generate data, learners and teachers, and they wrote group language skills. They were talking in English research. And what was very interesting, English for Academic Purposes, it seems people think it's going to be rather boring, a little bit dull. They know that they need to do it, but it's kind of dull. But these students became very excited. They stayed late after puzzles of other students, and they went around asking each other, what did you think? What did you find out? So that was interesting, highly motivating in itself. At the same time as the learners to analyse their puzzles in more depth, read around the topic, for example, interviewing or observing. They collected a small amount of data and teachers then went on to lead. They presented at conferences, colleagues. One of the teachers asked her learners, she read, and together they led a teacher, and then she went to an international conference. But that's not to say that everybody, she just wanted to continue with exploring. She's focused on creativity in her. She doesn't feel any pressure Both possibilities are equal. Learners can be thinking learning practices. So it's that learning that we want. One which also involved quality of life. And this informed another funded by the British Council, things of and practices in positives. And so, of course, there is some officially ended. We, other teachers involved. So I'll just talk very briefly about the work in the field about negative emotion, not so much about positive. This idea of sticky about the kinds of objects. There are all sorts of images themselves to them that stick in your mind. What emotions? Graphs, just on your phone. So in my case, that I took photographing at those flowers, and so that rainbow image really sticks in my mind as a sticky object, an object to which emotions are attached. In Kahoot, all the students looked amazed. One couldn't believe how such a small detail could. The photograph of the app, details make a change in the learning. Different things for the teachers, but one of them happy. Yeah, so it's a quality of life, something to do with well-being. You start by asking what teacher or a learner or both. Go back to some of those questions I asked at the beginning. Why do I want my students to speak in online situations? Why do I want to investigate about them? Mission, that would be unethical, are not including people from your classroom, could number of different objects. And then think about, while concerted effort attached to this, after I had taken the photographs, thinking that is to do with in knowing more about any of these is fully inclusive practitioner practice, reflective, but have a look at what other people around the world are doing. The second website is from the British Council, so I think you may find that interesting as well. If you want to read more, here are some books that you may find interesting. The full references are in the list at the end of the PowerPoint. So quality of life and understanding. I've talked also about emotions, positive emotions especially, and sticky objects. But to sum up, when we think about classrooms, about education, about educational research, we are constantly engaged in struggling to understand our classrooms, even in normal times. This is amplified during the pandemic. To understand our new normal, we need to ask questions about and to explore our practices. Exploratory practice using sticky objects, diaries and photographs can help us to positively connote for well-being. We begin to understand more, we begin to understand each other more. There are still some treasures that we can keep from this difficult time, enhancing quality of life.
All of us have got quite comprehensive information and insights in order to use as, let's say, a starting point for developing our quality of life and well-being in our classroom. Ladies and gentlemen, due to a certain technical constraint, Dr. Judith cannot synchronously share ideas or have question and answer with us today. So, yes, sorry to say that if you do have some questions, please post it in the chat box, and then the committee will send it later to Dr. Judith. So Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of Dr. Judith's presentations, and once again, let's give her a big applause. And the floor is returned to Dr. Raymond. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Pak Parlindungan Pardede, for moderating the two plenary sessions today. So I think after the fourth plenary session, we can say that this is the end of the second day of our international conference. The first AEJ UKI SLA Research International Conference with the theme English SLA in the Asian Context and Culture Post-COVID-19. Announcement. Please don't forget to fill out the attendance sheet today. This is very important, especially to our attendees, because in the rules that sent to all attendees, it is a must that they attend the 3-day conference. And for our presenters, it is suggested that you attend all the 3-day sessions of the conference. For attendees, your certificates will come from the Indonesian Conference Committee. For all presenters and to our plenary speakers, your certificates will come from the Philippine Committee of this international conference. So for our speakers and for our plenary speakers and our presenters, your certificates will be sent to you a week after our conference. So tomorrow, we'll have our new day, the last day of our international conference. We'll start the registration at 8:30 or 8:30 Jakarta time, 9:30 Philippine time. And we will start opening the parallel sessions in the 3 rooms at 9 in the morning Jakarta time, 10 in the morning Philippine time. And tomorrow afternoon, we'll listen to the last 2 plenary sessions that we have. The plenary session 5 will be from our invited speaker from the Mapua University, Manila, Philippines, Dr. Edward J. M. Quinto. And plenary 6 will be from Dr. Lamhot Naibaho from the Universitas Kristen Indonesia. So thank you very much for staying with us during the second day serving of our international conference. See you all tomorrow. Thank you very much. You do have a wonderful day ahead.
Fill me out with your smile. Now the sunshine brings the light. Fill me out with a flame. I will let you in this game. Take me out when I'm down. 'Cause with you I'm safe and sound. 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 out without flame. I will let you in this game. Take me out when I'm down, 'cause with you I'm safe and sound. Fill me out with your smile, while the sunshine brings the light. Fill me out with a flame. I will let you in this game. Take me out when I'm down, 'cause with you I'm safe and sound. 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 Sunshine brings the light. Fill me out